What's up there, workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and Gamestop has some new faces on its board of directors. On my way home from work today, I had a chance to call Brian and say, hey, what happened in gaming today? I really wasn't able to kind of check my phone or anything. And he said, you wouldn't believe who Gamestop appointed Reggie. And I said, Nintendo's Reggie? And he said, yeah. And to start off, because we got to get through we'll go through my context. Just so you're looking through my lens and you know that if you have a different experience with GameStop, where you may differ, then we'll talk about kind of what happened and like what the state of GameStop is, knowing that my bias, I'm getting it out of the way first because it's a really big bias. Normally I do the news first, we're going to do my bias first. And then on the back end, kind of what this means for the future of GameStop and whether or not this gives us any transparency into whether this is going to make some major changes for the retailer. And to just get kind of what happened, they simply put Bill Simon, big name in Walmart, J.K. Simonak, I don't know if I'm saying that right, who was a big guy in PetSmart, and our very own Reggie Fils-Aime, I don't know. I'm not very good with names that have like punctuation in them. My history with GameStop is that while I was in college, I had a chance to work for GameStop corporate, and I worked in a loss prevention role where we investigated loss cases in both box stores and predominantly where they happened, the distribution center itself, mainly focused on employee theft because employee theft at the time was actually a larger loss than the amount of theft happening in stores because it could be a lot more egregious because when you steal games from GameStop, what you do with a pile of 20 copies of a used game, they don't sell that fast on eBay, and you get yourself caught when you flag that you have 20 copies for sale. And so the easiest market to buy up used games is GameStop. And so you steal a bunch of games and then you sell them back to GameStop, and then you steal those same games again and you sell them back to GameStop. And more importantly, high dollar items, you get into like SD cards and a lot of things that they have access to that are higher dollar value and small enough that it can go into someone's pocket, harder to track, harder to know if an SD card is an SD card that we've already purchased in the past. And so that was a role that I had there, and it was over, I want to say it was like 3,000 stores at the time. This would have been in the early 2000s. 2000 probably 6 or 2008-ish. So it would have been a while back. So that's kind of my background on GameStop. It's not something I talk about a whole lot. Definitely not to the degree that many other YouTubers are, but I do have my unofficial, I'm not allowed to show it to you, gamer card where I've worked at GameStop, because I think that's a requirement to be defined as a true gamer for many, because it does feel like a substantial number of us have had at least a brief tenure with the retailer at some time or another in some role or another. And in recent years, our views of the company have been largely shaped by that. And our views of whether or not GameStop's doing a good job and whether or not GameStop's a good buying experience and whether or not they get our dollars is shaped by that. And it's definitely shaped by my views of the company and the way it runs internally. And I'm sure that different employees working in different parts would even have different views if they worked at the company at the same size, because not every employee of that company has the same perspective looking in, and so they don't all get treated the same. They don't all get access to the same. They're not all given the same information. It's a very big company, and so it's very siloed. And so your experience over here might be very poor, while somebody else's experience over here is having something that's relatively positive. So that's kind of where I come from. It was a lot of hours. It was a lot of exposure to kind of how I view retailers in general now. And it's something that I appreciate. It shaped my view of the business side of games, and it's definitely given me that perspective. And it's something that when I was later looking for employment, because obviously I stopped when it was time to go back out to school, I didn't seek out that employment again. So, I had my own positives and negatives there. And so just putting that in perspective as somebody who's what actually happened here. So Nintendo of America's former president, Reggie. So anybody who's watched North American Treehouse events and things like that, you're familiar with his face. If you Google his face, you go, oh, that's Reggie. Before, I want to say Bowser was Who's Next, right? So all the way up until last year, He'd been in charge for quite a while now. And they announced two others, Bill Simon and Jay Simonic, and they both have had roles in large retailers. But Reggie's really big overlap here is being part of a North American based company that has games in its definition. So they were brought on, and they were brought on to help GameStop change its direction towards profitability. They traded as high as like $50 or $60 when we look back at like when the Xbox Ones were first launching and things like that. So when we look back within the last decade, they've been trading at $60 a share. And as of this point, they're down in like single digits, like for under $5 a share. So they have simply plummeted in value. And that's because they have had to change their position as a retailer. If you think back to old school GameStop days, you went in there and there were bins of games and there were rows of games and everything was sectioned into its own little area that was themed around that console, and you could go in there and you could drop however much your allowance you could afford, and you could pre-order games, and it was all games. And when you go in there now, it looks a lot more like a Spencer's Gifts with a games theme, where there's action figures and shirts and all of this other stuff to support the games. And that piece of GameStop has grown more and more as they've changed the definition. But none of it has really helped as more and more, even though that every time Brian and I use the word digital purchase or anything, we can see right here on our very own little YouTube channel, we can see people come out and say, I will always buy physical. I always want physical. I want my physical disc. The numbers just don't line up with that being a summary of everybody. By and large, people have moved to live services like Game Pass, or they've moved to free-to-play games, or they've moved to buying digitally, which doesn't benefit GameStop. So even people who still buy a game with the intent of owning it for years and years to come, own it within a space like digitally on Xbox or through a process like Steam or anything like that. And so you just don't buy games at GameStop as much as you did. Even our hardware, a lot of times you can just order it straight to your house. You buy it from an online retailer, you buy it from, Amazon or from a retailer like Best Buy, which may still be through their online portal. And GameStop just hasn't made that transition where I think of them as a website to go to outside of maybe when I order a console. I ordered my Xbox Scorpio through there. I didn't buy a single one of my Xbox games from Xbox One forward at GameStop. Every single one of them has been bought digitally from when I made the switch. I think I had to buy like 2 or 3 games when the Xbox One first came out. So I'm looking up on my shelf. I bought 4 Xbox One games. Every single one of those was at Best Buy. Every single one of those was with a Best Buy gift card. That's what I did. I don't, all of my other games owned on Xbox One, that section of my game library up on my shelf is very, very small because it is the move to digital. And GameStop has struggled with that. So what he has been doing this whole time is I think he's been lecturing at like Cornell or maybe some other universities, and he's been giving like speaking appearances. I mean, he's largely retired. So as his role at board of directors, their goal is to become leaders and guiders of the change in where GameStop can go from here and how it can function as a business. When you look at the two people, and we're shifting into kind of the third part of this video because the first two are fairly short. When you look at what they can do, PetSmart is a retailer. They sell units of things. They happen to have a passion for pets, but AutoZone has a passion for cars. GameStop has a passion for games. At the end of the day, when you get up to the level they are, where you're overseeing thousands of locations with tens of thousands of employees, that comes down to a lot more, how do I get the thing done? And the passion for the games can really be a little bit secondary. Being the head of Walmart makes sense when you're dealing with, okay, how do I grow GameStop? How do I take on the online space? That's something Walmart has had to deal with, and they've done quite well in, and they've done it through their own practices, whether you agree with those or not. And PetSmart is a similar story. You look at any retailer that comes into a space and is still doing well at all by any definition, especially under that person's leadership, if they were doing well, there is a question of, okay, how can we bring that into our business? Because brick and mortar retail is something that has really struggled to take on the online space. And so those two names make sense. But this video is why Reggie? Like, I like Reggie. I think many of us like Reggie. And I think the fact that he's passionate about games, very cool. He's been in charge of a large company. Very cool. But when you hire for a position like this isn't about, okay, I've got a stack of resumes and I've got an hourly position that's going to be open just for the summer. Which person do I pick? This is something that takes months. It affects your stock price. If that person were to leave too soon, it negatively affects your stock price. If it doesn't already negatively affect it from decisions they've made, they affect the direction of the company as a whole. So even just electing to the board of directors has a huge impact on all of this. And there were 4 board members before this. I believe now this will take them up to 7. I couldn't find anything on whether or not those people were leaving. I think all 4 might be. There were more than 4. Excuse me. I'm reading it now, making sure I read this correctly. So there were 4 board members that would be leaving. And so this is a shift, and investors are going to have to make a decision on whether or not they think this group of people is more qualified than the last group, and that this is what's going to turn it around. And so you picture a sinking ship, right? And they say, okay, we've got a fair bit of money from all the years we did well, and we've got a fair bit of value. How do we save this ship? And it's like, okay, I got some people here that say they can invent the best life rafts. Why is Reggie on that list? Like, I like Reggie, and I assume they see something I don't see, because when I think about people that would be qualified for this position, he worked in charge of a lot of people in a North American gaming-based company that doesn't run box stores, doesn't have to run a profit. The Wii U didn't hurt Nintendo, and sells themselves as basically an IP holder of beloved IP to family household name products. GameStop is none of those things. GameStop is not a family held beloved name. Plenty of gamers dislike GameStop. It's not a universally loved thing. GameStop has no ownership of the space when it comes to IP. You can't wrestle Mario from Nintendo. But one of the reasons GameStop is struggling is that they don't own anything in the space. They lease the space. The vast majority of their impact, and they've had other impacts, the vast majority of their impact on the space was that they were a place where we bought games. And as other people have come in and done that, they have not been able to keep up. A lot like Blockbuster was not able to keep up with Netflix. If your business model doesn't change, the online space will simply push you out. And it's so they don't have the same assets. They don't have the same negotiating position. And so I don't understand how his perspective lines up. And so there must be something that I'm not seeing, right? There must be something that made him a logical third choice here. And I don't know what that is. He was the name that I just kind of was confused by. The other two make 100% sense. I don't get it. You know, like Jack in the Box has been making a big turnaround because they brought in some new leadership. And so Arby's has been making a big turnaround because they brought in new leadership. And they're defining that sector. And that was done by a good leadership change. And so there must be a reason they think he's part of that change. And I don't get it. I don't know what he is getting for compensation for that. I don't know what his role is specifically defined as, and what they're expecting of him. And so I really just wanted to kind of come out and discuss this. And I was talking over with Brian, and he and I started saying a lot of the same things. And when we say a lot of the same things, or we agree to disagree, that's usually the best time to go ahead and hit record. So that's what this is. This is just a free stream of thought. And Brian and I couldn't come to a consensus on why Reggie, what qualifies him. I grew up in Dallas. I live in the Dallas area now. My household likes Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman is like the head spokesman for an Acme brick company. What in the world does Troy Aikman know about bricks? I'm sure he's a great guy. I've never met him in person. I don't trust him with bricks. So why is Reggie in charge here? Why is he in charge of even being somebody who's being thought of as leadership? He's not being made CEO or anything, but why is he being given this seat at the table? It just seems odd. And as an investor, I don't own any GameStop shares, but as an investor, why is this a good thing? Why do I want to buy more shares as opposed to now selling shares? I need more info than this. So hopefully there's some press announcement to go this, because this is, I don't get it. It's a great guy, but like, I mean, it is no more applicable to me than picking a famous streamer or picking your favorite video game company director. Picking a sound designer. They're in the gaming industry. I get that, but simply being in the industry doesn't qualify them to know how a box store should stay relevant in its space. I don't know. I thought it was odd. Just figured I would kind of put that thought out there and see what you guys thought. This is just ramblings of Chris. Welcome to the Let's Discuss section. If you hate videos like this and you've stuck around this long, thank you. Feel free to put something down below. Like what I don't like about this video is the meatball subs. If you hate this video and you're still around, put something about meatball subs. If you do like videos like this and you're still around, tell me your favorite thing about turkey sandwiches. We'll see what we get down in the comments below in the sandwich discussion. And turkey sandwiches are good. Meatball subs are bad. Down below. So tell me what you love about meatball subs or you don't like about it or whatever if you don't like videos like this. But the red border around the thumbnail tells you it's a Let's Discuss, tells you it's going to be ramblings, going to be an opinion-based piece. It's not hard news. It's not hard informative. It's not nearly as important as something like a patch notes or if like Xbox bought Nintendo, right? That would be a much more like breaking. This is much more just... I don't know. I can't make up my mind on it. Maybe you guys can think it through. I've shared, this is a ton of my stream of thought as I kind of process this. I'm going to continue to process it. And I'm really intrigued why it is. If for no other reason it got me paying attention as opposed to if they just said, hey, the previous exec at Best Buy, Walmart, PetSmart, and AutoZone all are going to go help out at GameStop. You're like, logical, right? They all have their own experience in the box store space that's competed with online and had a somewhat online presence, but has not had the online presence of something like an Amazon. And that makes sense. The fact that there's kind of a celebrity endorsement within the executive of gaming company space. This makes no more sense to me than bringing on Ian Hanakostas from the WoW team or Yoshi P from the Final Fantasy team. I just don't know what they know about being in charge of GameStops. They're great guys. They're good at what they do. What does that have to do with selling gaming related merchandise? I admire GameStop's constant strive to try to save something that has struggled. If the merch hasn't been working, I've heard they've tried other things such as LAN cafes within stores and all sorts of things. They got to do something. You can't just say, well, people will come back to buying physical copies, because they just won't. So you've got to shift into being a collectible retailer, or you've got to shift into being a place that people congregate around games, gaming style cafes, things like that. You've got to make a pivot. While also hopefully gaining a bigger online presence, because I still don't think about them as one of the number one online places to buy games. You got to do something. You got to partner with somebody, or you're just going to be like Blockbuster, a beloved memory that just doesn't have a place long term. So best of luck, GameStop. I have disagreed with a lot of things you've done over the years. I've been thankful for all the games that I bought from you as a retailer. Reggie's a guy that it never bothered me that he was at the helm of Nintendo. And Nintendo's made its own series of decisions I disagreed with and agreed with. So I'm intrigued. And if you could give me some hint as to what in the world Troy Aikman has to do with bricks outside of, I believe he has part ownership, but like, what does he know? What does Reggie know about running GameStops? All right. This is it. My name's Chris with Work to Game. Rambling is over. Have a great day. Tell me about the sandwiches down below. I'll see you next time.